Plants vs. Zombies Heroes, a more obscure title within the franchise, and nobody hates it more than its fans. I was reading some of the comments for my videos as usual, and I came across this one. I initially didn't think much of it, as I already knew how much potential the Plants vs. Zombies franchise had, but then I started to think about it more. And more. And more and more and more and more and more. You get the idea. It reached its peak once I realized, hey, I know enough about card games, and I have some experience in graphic design. Why don't I just make it myself? And so I did. So, the first thing I did was figure out the overall design. Heroes, despite being a card game, doesn't have any proper cards outside of the condensed ones that don't show abilities. To actually see the text, you tap on the card to pull up a very un-card-like menu with all the details you need, so I really can't use either of those designs directly. I ended up with a look that combines the two of them, with the card's rarity color taking up the outside rim and the class color making up the background. Each card is divided into two parts. The top has the picture, stats, cost, and class symbol, and the bottom has the name, tribes, and abilities. The actual look is pretty simple all things considered, but if you have seen any of my videos, you can probably tell that I gravitate towards more streamlined designs. With the front design finished, I just had to make the back. This part took me surprisingly long to strip away all the backgrounds from the Heroes logo and make it fit in with the design, as well as create the half-plant, half-zombie icon to slap on top. I divided the background colors into green and purple, representing the plant and zombie factions, and finished it off with the features being a bright yellow. I wanted to find the proper size for cards, which was super easy, because I happen to own way too many Pokemon cards. I sent in some of the ones I never used to being the base for my Heroes cards, and printed both the front and back and pasted them onto the Pokemon card base. So I did it, right? A perfectly serviceable prototype for my PvZ Heroes card game. I can just print out the rest of these and call it a day. But what good is that? I've done this sort of thing dozens of times when proxying cards for my Pokemon decks. Something about it feels unprofessional. Looking for a potential solution to my problem, I went back to my source material. Pokemon cards have holographic borders for their rarer cards, so why shouldn't mine? A quick trip to the arts and crafts stores later, I returned with a couple rolls of holographic foil. I figured that if I wanted a silver color, I could just execute one of my holographic Pokemon cards to Death by Nail Polish Remover, and get the holofoil on its own that way. In fact, let's see what that looks like.
One eternity later.
Yeah, I'm not doing that again. Not only did it take longer than I expected to remove all of the outer card's design, it also destroyed the edges, which made the card ironically look even sloppier. Returning to the rolls of holographic foil, the stuff I bought had a really neat rainbow design that fits the style of PvZ Heroes legendary cards. And it also has an additional shine pattern that's used in old A-spec Pokemon cards, which happen to be some of my favorite looking cards to date. Now armed with a shiny material that won't destroy the card's bases, I cut out pieces around the cards and made this super cool looking rainbow layer. The next part was adding the cards themselves. I printed out the designs, added some adhesive to the back, and manually lined up the centers with a ruler. When I got a layer that worked, I removed the ruler and stuck the card onto the foil, and it was complete! As you might have noticed, I only gave the super holofoil treatment to the legendary cards and heroes. This is because 1. I don't feel like the rare and uncommon cards are special enough to deserve it. 2. I couldn't find any purple foil to use for the super rare cards. And 3. Doing one of these for every single card would cause me to delay this video until 2027. If you really want me to, though, you could convince me to do a follow-up to this. For the rest, the peasant cards, I used the traditional method of just the card overlay. I don't mind it as much now that the rarity tiers have been established. For the heroes and superpowers, I also spiced up the back with the gold holofoil. While it may be counterproductive at face value to make the backs of the hero cards different from the rest, I don't think it matters because these cards won't be played in your decks. We all know that Heroes is notorious for its heavy and often unrelenting RNG aspects. Sometimes it can be hysterical, and other times it can make you want to throw your phone into the nearest lake. In real life, you can't just conjure a random card from thin air, so some changes will need to be made if I'm going to take Heroes into the real world. Let's take a look at the Cosmic P card, for example. When played, you have to conjure a P. The card you conjure doesn't come from your deck, which is fully taken advantage of by the game's online environment. Here, I'll change the mechanic by having you reveal cards from the top of your deck until you find a card of the same type as what you're conjuring. While this retains the randomness from the source material, it allows for a smidge of extra control of what you could theoretically get. Cosmic P also shows the other part real-life cards can't keep track of: confidential stats. The P you conjure from the Cosmic version gains the Double Strike trait, something that the game automatically stores while it's in your hand. In real life, you could easily just lie about the card you conjured and say that your Pod Fighter gained Double Strike instead of a measly Pea Shooter. Unlike conjuring, there is no clear-cut answer to all of these. For the case of Cosmic P, I'll more or less take the bug and call it a feature. The next P you play gains the Double Strike trait. While this does technically mean that you can manipulate which card receives the buff, it can make for a more awkward sequencing that you'll need to play around skillfully. For some of the other rule changes, most of them were to accommodate for the limitations of the real world, and others were a result of some creative liberty I took when making these. The first, and probably biggest of these changes, is the addition of the ability to choose your lineup of superpowers your hero rolls with, because I'd imagine that if you pulled these from a pack, it'd be silly to go and say, "Yeah, I know that these superpowers are made within the classes your hero controls, but some arbitrary logic in the source material says that you must use a select 3. Tough luck." More of the randomness in the game is solved through coin flips. Take the Dolphinado superpower, for example. While the easiest solution to bouncing a quote-unquote random plant is to roll a die and assign each potential target to a number, things get messy very quickly, especially when there are fewer targets than there are outcomes. Instead, I made it so that you have moderate control over the superpower. In the real-life version, you flip a coin when you play the card. If the result is heads, you decide which plant to bounce. If tails, your opponent decides which of their own plants they would like to bounce. Coin flips and giving your opponent partial control of your negative outcomes is generally the easiest way of doing things. Minions that are summoned via tricks like Space Cadets skip the middle step and just become zombies that have the ability to be played during the tricks phase. Cards that create multiple minions like Infinity Clones or Shroom for 2 will have their abilities reworked entirely, as it's physically impossible to make 2 cards out of 1. The blocking mechanic was definitely the hardest one to translate though. The acquiring of superpowers through it was easy, because all you needed to do was shuffle your superpowers and set them aside and take a random one each time you block, kind of like Pokemon's prize cards. The way of charging the block meter was the problem. Since you only gain block charge in units of 1, 2, or 3, there's no convenient form of dice that can handle it. So, I returned to old reliable, the coin flip. If you flip heads, you roll a 2, and if tails, you roll a 1. To make up for this, I'll be shrinking the block meter down to 6 sections instead of 8. The other fundamental change comes from the setup of the lanes. In Heroes, the board looks the same for both players, despite being on opposite sides. A heights lane on the left, 3 lanes of ground in the middle, and 1 lane of water on the right. The issue is that if you have 2 people sitting across from each other, the sides of the heights and water will be inverted. Normally this wouldn't be an issue, but there is enough direction-based interaction in the video game to pose a problem. The easiest issue to fix surrounding directions is stated in the rules that the fighting starts in the heights lane and works its way towards the water. The rest of the game will play out relatively the same. Gravestone zombies will be played face down to hide their identity, and there will be little stat tokens to represent damage, buffs, debuffs, and so on. And that wraps up the rules. If you want to follow up to this video, please let me know by showing your support through likes, comments, and subscriptions. Overall, I really love how these turned out, and this was a wonderful way to start the new year. Thank you so much for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you later!